Some places whisper their secrets through the creak of a floorboard, the groan of old wood under cold night winds, or a chill that runs down your spine when there's no draft to blame. But others, they scream. Nestled high in the Colorado Rockies, framed by jagged peaks and ever-whispering pine forests, the Stanley Hotel is more than just a relic of grandeur and old-world charm. It's a gate, a living, breathing threshold between what we call reality and something ancient, something unrelenting. People say the Stanley is haunted. That's the safe version, the watered-down bedtime story version. But if you really dig into its past, if you walk the hallways alone, listen to the walls late at night, trace the burn marks beneath the rugs, or open the locked doors that no one speaks of, you'll discover something far more sinister, something the books left out, something the spirits themselves don't want you to know. This isn't your typical ghost story. This is a journey across 8 generations, through bloodlines cursed by whispers in the dark, and visions that blur the line between what's imagined and what's clawing through from the other side. Each chapter uncovers a buried secret, a horror unleashed, a moment where sanity and terror collide. And it all begins with a single step inside room 217. Dare to enter? Before you go further, ask yourself, would you sleep a night alone in the Stanley if it meant learning the truth? Or are some doors meant to remain closed forever? Comment your answer below. Would you face the whispers? And if this story chills you to the bone, and you want more terrifying truths and deep dives into the paranormal, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with fellow thrill seekers. This story will pull you into the abyss, and it won't let go. 1909, Estes Park, Colorado. The Stanley Hotel had just opened its doors to the public. Towering white and pristine against the rugged backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, it stood like a cathedral of luxury, untouched by the harshness of the surrounding wilderness. But that untouched grandeur was a lie. The land it stood on had long whispered warnings, if only anyone had listened. Thomas Ashford, a British-born spiritualist and medium, arrived at the Stanley as a guest of honor for the grand opening. F.O. Stanley himself, intrigued by Ashford's reputation for speaking with the dead, invited him for entertainment, publicity, and secretly for consultation. Strange things had happened during construction. Workers had gone missing. Tools had moved on their own. Voices echoed through the empty skeleton of the hotel long before the first guest arrived. Ashford stepped through the ornate front doors, cane in one hand, a small leather-bound journal in the other. He felt it immediately, the pulse, a thrumming beneath the floorboards that beat just slightly out of sync with the world, like a second heartbeat. He tried to mask the shiver running up his spine. This place didn't just house energy, it contained it, barely. The guests arrived by horse-drawn carriages and steam-powered autos, laughing and marveling at the Stanley's magnificence. But Ashford stayed quiet, watching the walls breathe. That night, he requested to stay in room 217. A storm rolled in without warning. The mountain air turned sharp and electric. The hotel's lights flickered, but the staff dismissed it. Mountain power, they called it. Ashford, however, lit no candle. He let the dark surround him. He opened his journal and began to write. There is a rift here, a tear in the veil. Something old dwells beneath this place, older than the mountains themselves. It waits. The floorboards creaked behind him. He turned, but the room was empty. He returned to the journal. It watches me. Suddenly the mirror cracked, not shattered, but a slow fracture down the middle, like a vein opening in glass. Behind his reflection, something flickered. A figure, pale, dripping, eyes like holes. He spun again. Nothing. Then the whispers began. At first, barely audible. Software, like wind brushing past the ear. But they grew louder, chanting, in a language he didn't understand, guttural and raw, like bone on bone. Ashford tried to stand, but the temperature in the room plummeted. Frost bloomed across the windows. His breath turned visible, coming faster and faster. The cane in his hand trembled. He reached for the door, but it wouldn't budge. He wasn't alone anymore. A dark smear crept from under the bed, slithering, expanding, a wet, inky stain that pulsed. Then, fingers, skeletal, crawling forward, followed by a twisted arm, then a head, a face that wore his own. Ashford screamed, but the journal, now blood-stained, was taken by F.O. Stanley and locked away in the basement archives. But the whispers didn't stop. 1912. 3 years later, a chambermaid named Evelyn Moore was assigned to room 217. Since the Ashford incident, the room had been closed, but an overbooking forced management to reopen it. Evelyn was warned about the room's drafts and how things occasionally shifted. She didn't believe in ghosts. Not yet. That night, while turning down the bed, the lamp shattered by itself, throwing glass across the floor. The closet door slammed. Laughter, childlike and cruel, echoed from behind it. She opened it. Empty. She turned to leave and saw something in the mirror. Herself, but with a rope around her neck. When she woke up, she was on the floor, gasping, handprints bruised into her throat. She quit the next day but was found wandering the woods a week later, naked, muttering about a dark root beneath the floorboards. F.O. Stanley died in 1940, but the hotel remained in the family. Rumors of hauntings became part of the allure. The owners leaned into it. Ghost tours, seances, marketing gold. But none of them knew what Thomas Ashford had written in his final entry, the one no one read. The hotel is not haunted by the dead. The hotel is the ghost. Present day, 2023. Mara Ellison, a documentarian specializing in paranormal investigations, arrived at the Stanley to begin a deep dive into its haunted past. She wasn't a believer until that week. Her crew set up cameras in every hallway, every known haunted room, including room 217. The footage from the first night? Corrupted. Not by static or technical failure. It had been overwritten by screaming. A single word repeated over and over. Stay. Mara couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw a figure in the mirror. A man with a cane and no eyes. Then the dreams came. Blood-soaked hallways. Children crying behind locked doors. A basement with no end. And always at the center of it all, a heart still beating beneath the hotel. Waiting. And this is only the beginning. What secret did Ashford uncover? Why does room 217 feed on those who enter? And what is it that breathes beneath the foundation of the Stanley? The Ashford line did not end with him, and someone is about to unlock the truth, whether they want to or not. October 2023, Denver, Colorado. The city was noisy, always humming with distant traffic and flickering neon. Daniel Ashford had grown up hearing the name Thomas Ashford whispered like a family curse. Never discussed at holidays, never mentioned in polite company. His father kept a locked drawer in the study labeled simply Stanley. Daniel had picked the lock when he was 17. Inside, a faded photo of a man with sunken eyes and a long black coat, an old journal stained with what looked like dried blood, and a letter written in frantic handwriting that ended mid-sentence. He never touched it again. Not until he saw the news report. Paranormal filmmaker Mara Ellison hospitalized following Stanley Hotel investigation. Claims of hallucinations and violent visions. Room 217 once again closed to the public. The name jolted something loose. Daniel didn't believe in ghosts, but curiosity was a powerful drug, especially when tied to a family secret buried for over a century. The next morning, he boarded a bus for Estes Park. The Stanley Hotel loomed like a carcass in the snowlight, white and wide-eyed, surrounded by whispering pines. The mountains beyond were lost in a fog that never seemed to lift. The second Daniel stepped off the bus, the air shifted. It wasn't just cold, it was watching. He checked into room 407, a floor below 217. The concierge, a wiry woman with a name tag that read Marla, hesitated when Daniel asked about 217. "It's under maintenance," she said too quickly, avoiding his eyes. Daniel dropped his bag in the room and opened the old journal he had taken from his father's desk. The pages smelled of mildew and copper. The entries were brief, sharp, like they'd been carved more than written. The mirror doesn't reflect. It remembers. The shadow wears faces. Last night it wore mine. I tried to leave. The hallway stretched. I walked for hours. He looked up, suddenly uneasy. The floor creaked, but no one was there. That night, Daniel wandered the hotel. The halls were silent, save for the occasional groan of ancient wood and the distant hum of the elevator, though no one had used it. He found himself in front of room 217. The door was sealed with yellow tape, but something had scratched through the surface. A single word, open. He stared at it for too long. Then, footsteps, behind him, fast. He turned, heart in his throat. No one. But the door creaked open. The tape fell off on its own. Inside, the room was dark. A single lamp buzzed. The mirror on the far wall had been shattered. Jagged glass remained like teeth. On the bed sat a woman, pale with long dark hair covering her face. "Mara," he whispered. The head jerked up. Not Mara. Not even close. The face was wrong. Stretched, skin flaking like wax near flame. And the eyes, voids, bottomless and ancient. He stepped back. The figure stood. The room tilted. The shadows moved with intention. Suddenly a scream. His own cut the silence. And then, nothing. Daniel awoke in room 407, drenched in sweat, journal on his chest, door chained from the inside. He scrambled to his feet and rushed into the hall. No room 217. The hall had changed. The room numbers skipped from 215 to 219. No door, no space where 217 should have been. But the walls were wet. Later that day, he visited the hotel archives, a cluttered room below the basement, accessible only with permission. Marla had been hesitant, but oddly insistent. "If you're family, you have a right to know." The room was dim, filled with dusty ledgers and century-old floor plans. Daniel rifled through blueprints, floor diagrams, and incident reports. In a manila envelope labeled 1973 renovation, restricted, he found a blueprint. Room 217 was not on the original layout. In its place, a black square labeled void access. He didn't understand what it meant until he found a journal page slipped between the plans. It wasn't Thomas Ashford's. This one was more recent. Mara's handwriting. "I followed the whisper down into the walls. The bones of this place are not wood or stone. They're alive. They bleed. It's a heartbeat beneath our feet." He was right. Ashford was right. We never should have opened the door. Below the last line, drawn in shaky ink, was the same symbol scratched into room 217's door the night before. A circle of thorns, an eye in the center. Bleeding. That night, Daniel did something reckless. He went back to the hallway. Still no room 217, but this time he came prepared, with a crowbar. He knocked on the wall where it should be. Hollow. He drove the crowbar into the drywall, and it screamed. The wall wailed like an animal in pain. Blood, not paint, not rot. Blood poured down the surface. The wallpaper peeled back in strips like torn skin. A hole opened, leading into pitch black. He stepped inside. His flashlight flickered. The air was moist and putrid, like rotting meat. The corridor beyond wasn't part of the hotel. It was carved out of earth, breathing, twitching. The walls pulsed. Roots dangled like veins. He followed the tunnel deeper, every step dragging like it didn't want him to leave. Then the hallucinations began. Children crying, a woman calling his name, whispers in Thomas Ashford's voice. You brought it back. You opened it again. He stumbled into a cavern. In the center, a mirror, whole, unbroken. It showed a hotel in flames, people running, the staff laughing, their faces wrong, stretched and fanged, and in the background always the heartbeat. He reached out, and the mirror rippled. From behind him, a voice. "Welcome home, Daniel." He turned and screamed. He woke up outside the Stanley, shirt soaked in sweat and blood, face cut. No one saw him enter. No one saw him leave. But something followed him. The hotel was closed for the season the next day. Emergency repairs. No explanation. Daniel returned to Denver, But every mirror he passed now showed room 217, and something inside it was getting closer. November 2023, Denver, Colorado. Daniel Ashford hadn't slept in days. When he closed his eyes, the walls bled. When he blinked, he saw figures standing at the corners of his vision, tall, faceless things in bellhop uniforms. His apartment lights flickered, even though there was no outage. The mirrors no longer showed his reflection. They showed room 217, every time, from a different angle, as if something inside the room was circling, slowly creeping closer. Desperate for help, he reached out to Harper Lane, a friend from college who had gone deep into paranormal psychology. She was skeptical at first until he showed her the footage from his GoPro, shaky, grainy, and corrupted by static, but clear enough to show that he had indeed broken through a wall at the Stanley Hotel and stepped into a place that should not exist. But the worst part? In one frame, just before the camera cut out, Harper saw her own face staring back at her from inside the mirror. "We need to go back," she whispered. 1 week later, they returned to Estes Park, this time under the cover of night. The Stanley was closed for seasonal maintenance, the gates locked and lights off. But Daniel knew the trail through the woods. He had memorized it, like an itch beneath his skull that wouldn't let go. They entered through a side basement door, rusted but unlocked. Inside, the hotel groaned with absence. Harper walked ahead with a high-powered flashlight while Daniel clutched his grandfather's journal like a talisman. The floorboards creaked under their feet. Every corner whispered. Every hallway seemed to stretch an inch longer than it should have. And then there it was. Room 217. Back again. Door intact. Number clean. No tape. No damage. It had returned. Harper reached for the knob. Daniel grabbed her wrist. "Wait," he said. "It remembers you." "Then we remember it," she said, and twisted the handle. It opened with a slow, moist sound, like wet lungs inhaling. Inside, the room looked ordinary. Too ordinary. Pristine like a showroom model. The bed was made. The mirror had been replaced. The air, though, was stifling, heavy with something invisible, like decay wrapped in perfume. Harper approached the mirror. "This is where it starts," she said. "No," Daniel whispered. "This is where it ends." He threw the journal onto the bed and opened it to the final page, the one he had been too afraid to read. A handwritten warning from Thomas Ashford. "It lives in reflections. It bleeds through thought. Do not speak to it. Do not bargain. Do not acknowledge its name. To look is to be known." But below the warning, a name had been scratched into the page. Over and over, so hard it had torn through the paper. Avroth. The lights went out. Harper's flashlight died. From the mirror, something breathed. They both froze as a second reflection appeared behind them in the glass. A third. A fourth. Soon the mirror was a crowd of people, none of whom were there. They looked like former guests, but their faces were wrong. Melted, smiling, repeating Daniel's name in unison. "Daniel, Daniel, don't look," he said. But Harper couldn't look away. Her eyes widened. Her mouth dropped open. And then she screamed. The mirror cracked. Not spiderweb's runes. The glass didn't just fracture. It transformed, revealing a landscape behind it. The hotel, but not a version of the Stanley that was twisted, decaying, infinite, alive, halls that looped, walls that bled, a dining room where the chandelier was made of teeth. And then Harper was pulled forward, face smacking the glass, arms trembling. Her reflection no longer matched her movements. Daniel grabbed her, tried to yank her back, but the mirror resisted, like hands reaching from the other side. A force that wanted her. "Let her go," he shouted, and the mirror spoke. Not aloud, but in his mind, cold and brutal. "Give us the journal, the key," and she walked. Daniel hesitated, but Harper turned to him, her real face, and whispered, "Don't you dare." He reached into his bag instead, pulling out a silver cross. His father had given him as a boy. He slammed it into the glass. It exploded. The scream that followed was not human. Glass sliced across their skin. Blood splattered the bed. The room shrieked, walls bending inward, as if the hotel itself were gasping. Daniel pulled Harper back. She stumbled into his arms, dazed. Behind them in the shattered mirror's void, a face began to emerge. Too large, too wrong. Horn, eyeless, mouth stretching from chin to chest, whispering in tongues that sounded like every voice Daniel had ever heard. All at once, they ran. In its place, a hallway that wasn't there before. Flickering lights, old jazz music echoing faintly. They were no longer in the same Stanley. "What is this place?" Harper whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't know. But one thing was clear. They weren't alone. From around the corner came the sound of something dragging. Heavy, wet. Then a whisper. "We see you." A bellhop stepped into the hallway. Or rather, something wearing a bellhop's uniform. The skin on its face shifted constantly, flashing between dozens of people, all with dead eyes and stitched mouths. It raised one hand, and the ceiling above them began to pulse, dripping black ether. They ran again through halls that morphed as they moved. Carpet turned to stone. Paintings on the walls began to scream. Every door they tried was locked. Or worse, not a door anymore, but a window into another room in the hotel, where people paced endlessly, clawing at the walls, eyes bleeding. Finally, they reached a door marked laundry. It was open. Inside, the original mirror, whole again, waiting, reflected in its surface. The basement, untouched. "I think it's a portal," Daniel said. "A way out." Harper grabbed his hand. They stepped forward together. The mirror rippled, and they were back. Same clothes, same wound, but the basement was normal again. The jazz was gone. The hotel silent. But something wasn't right. Harper turned to Daniel, and Daniel stared back at her, terrified, because the reflection in her eyes wasn't him. November 2023, Denver, Colorado. 3 days later, Harper didn't remember leaving the Stanley. 1 minute she was stepping through a mirror with Daniel. The next, she was waking up in her own apartment, with no recollection of how she got there. Her calendar said 3 days had passed. The mirror in her bedroom, though that remembered everything, she avoided it at first, turned it to face the wall, but the scratching started that night. Scratch, scratch. It echoed in her bones, like something inside the glass was trying to carve its way out. When she finally turned it around, her own reflection smiled back. A second too late. That's when she knew the hotel had taken something from her, and left something behind. Daniel wasn't doing much better. He spent his days poring over Ashford's journal, drawing circles of thorns and eyes on every piece of paper he could find. He couldn't sleep. Every time he blinked, he was back in the hallway watching the mirror's pulse like lungs. The worst part, Harper wasn't Harper anymore. Not fully. She still laughed the same, still used his nickname, still made coffee too strong. But sometimes when she looked at him, there was a flicker like someone else was behind her eyes watching. He never said anything, not until the night she stood outside his door at 3:33 a.m., whispering his name over and over. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel." He opened the door. She wasn't there, but the mirror across the room showed her standing behind him, determined to break the curse. They turned to the only person who might understand the depth of the Stanley's horrors. Mara Ellison, now institutionalized in a private facility, an hour outside Denver. Mara hadn't spoken to anyone since her own encounter in room. But when Harper and Daniel showed up at the gate, she was already waiting for them. "You brought it back," she said, voice thin and shaking. "You opened it again. We need to know how to stop it," Daniel said. Mara's eyes twitched to the mirror mounted in the room. It was covered in black cloth. "It doesn't stop," she said. "It only spreads. The moment you stepped through, it marked you." "Marked?" Harper asked. Mara pulled back her sleeve. Beneath her skin something writhed. Not a tattoo. Something alive, moving just below the surface. "Evroth," she said. "It's not a ghost. Not a demon. It's the hotel itself. It feeds on time, on memory, on versions of us. Every time someone enters room 217, another fragment of their soul stays behind. And what returns," she looked directly at Harper, "isn't always them." Harper turned away, trembling. Daniel asked the question they had both been avoiding. "How do we reverse it?"
Mira laughed short, bitter. You don't. But there's one way to trap it. Seal it. She reached under her pillow and handed Daniel a photograph. It was room 217. Except this version looked ancient. Walls blackened. Furniture splintered. In the center, a mirror with an iron frame covered in bones. Around it, a circle of candles and symbols scrawled in blood. This was the original ritual. Mira said. Ashford tried to use. He failed. But he left behind the incantation. Daniel opened the journal to the torn back page. And there it was. Let that which reflects become the prison. Let the eye be blinded. Let the mouth be sewn. Say it in the room. Mira whispered. Seal the mirror. But if it goes wrong, you'll never leave. That night they returned to the Stanley again. The town was silent. The wind cold enough to bite through jackets. As they approached, the hotel seemed smaller, or larger, uncertain, like it hadn't quite settled into this version of reality yet. Inside, the power was out. The walls flickered between wood and something else, wet stone, ribbed and breathing. Room 217 waited for them. Harper drew the circle. Daniel lit the candles, and together they chanted, Let that which reflects become the prison. The mirror began to tremble. Harper's reflection moved on its own. Eyes black, mouth smiling wide enough to split her cheeks. Let the eye be blinded. Glass cracked. The room went cold. A sound began. A screech. A howl. 1,000 voices shrieking in one unholy pitch. Let the mouth be sewn. Boom. The door slammed shut. The candles blew out. The mirror exploded into liquid shadow, sucking everything into it. Harper was the first to be pulled. Daniel grabbed her hand, but her grip slipped. Harper. She screamed, but from inside the mirror he saw her in there, floating, trapped. The mirror tried to pull him next. He reached into his pocket for the silver cross and pressed it to the surface. It sizzled, burned. The shadows screamed. Everything stopped. Daniel woke up in the middle of room 217. Empty. Normal. The mirror gone. Harper gone. He stumbled outside. The hotel was quiet. Abandoned. Lifeless. No trace of the ritual. No blood. No markings. It was as if none of it had ever happened. But the second he stepped outside, the sky blinked. Clouds turned in reverse. The trees swayed without wind. The world shifted slightly wrong. The world shifted slightly wrong. Back in Denver, Daniel tried to return to normal life. But every time he passed a mirror he saw her. Harper, trapped, mouth sewn shut, eyes begging, and behind her the hotel, still there, still hungry, still open.
December 2023. Daniel's apartment, Denver. The city had become a cage of glass. Everywhere Daniel went, he saw reflections. Windows, puddles, elevator doors, and each one whispered to him in Harper's voice. Sometimes pleading, sometimes mocking. He'd taken to covering every mirror in his apartment with thick black cloth, duct tape, even paint. But still at night, the whispers came. You left me. You opened the gate. You let me drown. He scoured the journal again and again, searching for anything he'd missed. Hidden symbols, cryptic verses. But every time he turned a page, he saw it, the face of the thing in the mirror. The one behind Harper. Avarath, a name that didn't belong in any known language. A presence that wasn't bound by time. It had latched onto him and now it was bleeding into his world. One day, while flipping through the final torn pages of the journal, a photo fell out, not one he remembered seeing before. It was faded, colorless. A group of people standing outside the Stanley, early 1900s. Men in coats, women in gowns. But one man at the center caught Daniel's eye. It was Thomas Ashford, his great-grandfather. And standing beside him, arm in arm, was a woman who looked exactly like Harper. Same face, same eyes, only the photo was dated 1912, and scribbled on the back was a single sentence. She always comes back. The next day, Daniel checked himself into the Warrenton Institute for Cognitive Rehabilitation, not because he thought he was insane, but because he believed no one else would believe him, unless he acted insane first.
The hospital was sterile and cold. No mirrors. That helped at first. He requested sessions with the head psychiatrist, Dr. Kessler, an aging woman with a sharp gaze and skeptical demeanor. "I'm being followed by a reflection," he told her on the third session. She wrote something down without blinking. "Tell me more." "It lives in the Stanley Hotel. It uses mirrors. It took someone from me. And what do you believe this entity wants from you?" "Everything," Daniel muttered. "And it's not just me. It's anyone who goes into that room." She leaned forward. "Room 217. He blinked. "You know it. I read your file. I also spent 2 summers working at that hotel when I was in my 20s. I remember that room very well." Her voice softened. "Some places don't just have history. They have residue." Daniel tensed. "You believe me?" "I believe trauma makes us see things, but I also believe some trauma isn't ours." That night, in his hospital room, he heard the whisper again. Not in his head, from the wall. "She always comes back." 3 days later, a nurse vanished from the ward. Security cameras glitched from 2:13 to 2:17 a.m. 4 minutes gone, just like that. Daniel knew it had found him again. Desperate, Daniel staged a breakdown and was released on medical leave. He had one destination in mind. Back to the Stanley, but this time he wouldn't enter as himself. He'd found something buried deep in Ashford's notes. A theory he had skipped over before. The fracture of the soul can be reversed, but only if the reflection chooses to release it. To do this, the soul must willingly break itself again, must relive the original moment, must fool the mirror. Daniel packed nothing but a recorder, the photo of Harper and Ashford, and a shard of the mirror he'd taken from the hotel months ago. December 21st, winter solstice. He arrived just before sunset. Snow blanketed the grounds, muting the world into a white, breathless silence. The hotel loomed ahead like a mausoleum, shadows creeping from its foundation. He entered without resistance. No locks, no alarms. It wanted him back. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. His breath fogged the air. This time, room 2, just a hallway that looped forever, turning. Doors repeating. The carpet underfoot writhed, the patterns swirling like snakes. He kept walking, following the pulse, following her voice. Daniel, and then he saw her, Harper, standing at the far end of the hall, barefoot in a white hospital gown. Eyes wide. "Help me," she whispered. He ran to her. She stepped back into a doorway. He followed, and fell. He landed in the original mirror chamber, but not as it was before. Now it was crumbling, ceiling dripping ink. The bones that had framed the mirror were now moving, twitching, whispering. In the center of the room, the mirror, floating off the ground, surrounded by ghostly figures, men, women, children, reflections, all staring, and inside the glass, Harper. But something was wrong. She was laughing. "Daniel," she purred, her voice a mix of 1,000 tones. "I told you not to follow me." He stepped forward. "What are you?" She cocked her head. "The better version, the one that survived, the one who knows how to feed it." "You're not her." "No," she said, placing a pale hand on the glass. "I'm you. I'm the part of you that wants this. You were always drawn here, always obsessed. That's why you keep coming back. That's why she came back in night. That's why she's here now." And then, stepping out from the shadows, the real Harper, eyes sunken, mouth still sewn. She tried to scream. Daniel raised the mirror shard and stepped into the circle. The whispering figures surged forward, but he screamed the incantation again. "Let that which reflects become the prison." The mirror shuddered. The fake Harper lunged at him, eyes burning black. "Let the eye be blinded." The ceiling cracked. Figures screamed. "Let the mouth." She tackled him. They wrestled on the stone floor, the mirror shard slipping from his hand. "Let the mouth be." She sank her teeth into his shoulder. Blood poured. He reached for the shard again, sewn, and drove it into her throat. She screamed, not in pain, but like glass breaking. The figures evaporated. The mirror imploded. Everything went dark. Daniel awoke in the hallway of the Stanley. Room 217 was behind him. the mirror shard still in his hand. And Harper, the real Harper, lay beside him, unconscious, breathing. But the mirror had cracked again, and from its fractured surface, something else watched, smiling. December 22, 2023, 2:17 a.m. The Stanley Hotel. Harper's eyes fluttered open as icy air bit at her skin. The taste of blood still lingered on her lips, foreign, coppery, old. Her stitched mouth had somehow come undone, but the skin around her lips throbbed, as if the thread had just been torn. She sat up, disoriented, and looked beside her. Daniel, lying sprawled across the floor of the hallway, clutched the mirror shard tightly in one hand. It was pulsing now, humming like a heartbeat. Its glow danced across the walls, revealing shadows that didn't move with them. She shook him awake. His eyes shot open with a gasp, wild and unfocused. "Did it work?" she asked, voice hoarse. He looked at her stunned for a moment, then his eyes filled with tears. "You're back," he whispered. But Harper's eyes narrowed. "Something's wrong." The hotel was different again. The walls shifted as they watched, paper peeling backward to reveal something beneath. A second hotel, twisted and darker, nested like a parasite inside the real one. They had pierced the illusion, but not shattered it. A hallway light flickered overhead. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. They both turned. A man in a bellhop uniform emerged from around the corner, skin pale, lips blue, eyes hollow. His neck was twisted grotesquely to one side, as if snapped. He walked with a limp, dragging a shattered lantern in one hand. "Guests aren't allowed down here after midnight," he croaked. "Run," Harper hissed. They darted down the hall, but every turn led them back to room 27. No matter where they went, the hallway looped. On the third pass, the bellhop was waiting right outside the door. Only now he was joined by two more staff, a maid with a mouth full of teeth, and a concierge with no face. Daniel gripped the shard tighter. "They're reflections." "No," Harper said. "They're what's left of the people who never escaped." They stepped backward into the room. The door slammed shut behind them. Mirrors lined every wall now, more than before, and in every reflection they saw themselves, but older, rotting, burning, bleeding. Each mirror showed a death. "Welcome back," said a voice from behind them. Thomas Ashford, or something, wearing his face. His ghostly form shimmered in the flickering candlelight, his eyes weeping black tears. He was tall, dressed in a three-piece suit, but his chest had been hollowed out, his heart cavity a mirror pulsing with light. "You brought her back, Daniel, but you brought all of it back too." Harper raised her arm, revealing the same writhing marks Mara had shown them. Only now, they slithered up her neck like vines. "You used me," she said. "You planted me in time." Ashford nodded. "And she grew into exactly what I needed. You were always the key." "Harp, what is this place?" Daniel demanded. "What the hell are you?" Ashford stepped closer. His voice echoed through every mirror in the room. "I am a splinter," he said. "A fragment left behind when the first mirror cracked. I am hunger, memory, echo. Every soul that enters this place feeds me. Every reflection gives me shape." He raised one hand. The mirrors screamed. One by one, the reflections stepped out. Twisted versions of Daniel and Harper, smiling with empty eyes, their skins bubbled, bones visible beneath. "They don't want to be forgotten," Ashford whispered. "Neither do I." The lights blew out. Darkness swallowed the room. Harper screamed. Something grabbed her ankle, dragging her across the floor. Daniel lunged, swinging the shard wildly. A spark of blue light burst from the mirror. As the shard connected with one of the doppelgangers, its face split open, revealing more glass beneath. "They're made of it," he yelled. "They're all part of the mirror." He grabbed Harper's hand and pulled her toward the fireplace at the far end of the room. "Break it," she shouted. "We have to break the source." Daniel turned, eyes locked on the largest mirror, the original one, now warped and churning like black oil. He charged. The doppelganger Daniel intercepted him, tackling him to the ground, choking him with inhuman strength. As the life began to fade from his eyes, Harper screamed and threw the shard like a dagger. It struck the fake Daniel between the eyes. Glass erupted from the wound, exploding outward like shrapnel. The room shook. The real mirror began to crack. Ashford screamed. Not in pain but in rage, his chest shattered. Mirror light spilling out in jagged beams. You fools, you think you've won. You can't kill a reflection. Only trap it again. It's not me you're fighting. It's the hotel. It's forever. The ground caved in beneath them. They fell, darkness again, and then, a room. Not room 27, not the mirror room. Something older, colder. Stone walls, candlelight, ancient symbols scrawled in blood across the floor. The real Stanley, or what it once was. A voice filled the chamber. Female, elegant, ethereal. Do you wish to contain it, or become it? Daniel looked up. A woman stood before them, her face blurred and flickering. You opened it, she said. You let it loose again, but there is one way to close it forever. Harper stood beside him, silent. What way? Daniel asked. The woman held out two objects, a mirror and a blade. One must remain inside, she said. One must watch the door. One must be the seal. Harper's hand trembled as she reached toward the mirror. Daniel stopped her. No, she looked at him, tears in her eyes. It's me at once, Daniel. I'm the echo, the key. No, he repeated. We find another way. But the woman in white simply said, You don't have time. A growl echoed from behind them, deep, guttural. Averoth was coming.
December 22, 2023. The heart below. They stood in the chamber beneath the Stanley, encircled by blood-stained sigils that pulsed like open wounds. The stone beneath their feet was slick with condensation. Or was it sweat? The air was thick with rot and the copper tang of something ancient. The woman in white hovered inches above the ground, her eyes devoid of pupils, her voice echoing like wind in a cathedral. She offered no name, only choice. One must remain. One must become the seal. Harper's hand hovered over the mirror again. It vibrated in place, its surface undulating like liquid. Behind its shifting image, 1,000 faces screamed in silence. Daniel stepped in front of her, shaking his head. I'll stay. But Harper turned to him, voice calm. You're the one it chose. It's in your blood. You're the descendant. That's why I have to go, he said. If I stay, it'll find a way out again. Through me. But if you... He stopped. Something shifted behind her. The shadows lengthened. A presence, watching. Everdath had arrived. Not a creature, not exactly, but a force that took shape, built from everything it had consumed over the centuries. It flowed into the room like tar, walls cracking under its weight, its form twisted and changed. Part mirror, part man, part void, and at its core eyes, so many eyes blinking out of sync. Fools, it hissed, voice vibrating through their bones. You speak of keys and seals as if you were ever in control. Daniel raised the blade. Harper grabbed the mirror. The woman in white stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. The stone chamber trembled. Harper's eyes began to glow, veins blackening across her arms. The mirror was binding to her already. Everest surged forward. Daniel charged to intercept, slashing wildly. The blade collided with its form and shattered into splinters. He was flung backward against the wall, bones cracking. Everest turned to Harper. You have her face, it said. But she was weaker. You had inhaled, its voice melting into hers. You have always been the one I wanted. Harper fell to her knees, mirror pulsing against her chest. It began absorbing the room, pulling in the walls, the sigils, even the candlelight. The screams in the mirror grew louder. And then Harper spoke, not with her voice but with Ashford's. The seal is willing. The echo is contained. Let the reflection become the prison once more. The mirror shone brilliant blue, the same hue from the mirror shard now gone. Everest screamed. Every reflection in the mirror began shattering inward, drawn into its center like a black hole. The room itself crumbled, ceiling breaking open to reveal glimpses of the Stanley's floors above, its halls, its rooms, all fracturing. And then silence. The chamber was gone. The mirror floated midair. Harper was gone too. Denver, December 24, 2023. 2 days later, Daniel awoke in a hospital bed. The room was sterile, real. For once, nothing stared at him from the corners. A nurse entered, smiled kindly.
"You're lucky," she said. "You were found just outside the Stanley. You were unconscious in the snow. They almost declared you dead." He winced. "Harper." The nurse shook her head. "You were alone." The mirror shard was still clenched in his hand. 1 week later, Daniel stood before the Stanley Hotel again, now cordoned off by local police and federal agents. A massive sinkhole had collapsed, half of the east wing. Investigators claimed it was due to structural instability. But Daniel knew better. Room 27, no hallway led to it. He walked through the ruins in secret that night, stepping over beams, broken glass, splintered staircases. And there, in the rubble, he found it. The mirror untouched, still whole, still pulsing, still waiting. And inside, faintly, Harper's face watching him. Elsewhere, unknown time and place, Harper sat in a room without walls, without light. The mirror had devoured everything. She was the seal now, but within her stretched infinite corridors, lined with memories, screens, reflections. And Everest, still here, still whispering, "Not forever," it said. "Nothing is." January 1, 2024. Boulder, Colorado. Daniel sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by drawings, maps and research documents. The mirror, wrapped in several layers of black cloth and locked in a steel crate, rested in the farthest corner of the room. He hadn't touched it in days, but it still whispered. He didn't need to open it to hear Harper's voice anymore. She was part of it now. Sometimes at night, he would dream of her standing inside the mirror, her eyes glassy, her hands pressed against the inner surface, mouthing words he couldn't hear. Other times he'd wake up to find his own reflection staring back, even when no mirrors were in sight. He hadn't left the apartment since Christmas. He didn't trust himself. He didn't trust himself. January 3, 2024. The mirror room. Inside the seal, Harper drifted through endless corridors of fractured time. Within the mirror, rooms led to other rooms, some mimicking the Stanley, others unrecognizable. There were faces trapped in every reflective surface, some recent, others dating back centuries. Some begged for help, others watched in silence. And then, there was avarice, never gone, never silent. It slithered between the cracks, speaking in thoughts and nightmares. "You think you've caged me," it would say, "but you only gave me a better vantage point." Every day it crept closer, feeding on her doubts, twisting her memories. Harper began to lose sense of who she was, where she began, and where it ended. January 5, 2024. Daniel's apartment. Daniel had stopped sleeping. The mirror was moving again, not physically, but within. Shadows now slithered beneath the cloth, like something crawling through viscous liquid. His walls bled condensation, and the lights flickered when he thought about her. He couldn't stop seeing her. He tried to destroy the mirror. He doused it in salt, hammered the crate shut with nails dipped in silver, poured holy water from the monastery in Estes Park over it. Still she called to him. That night he sat in front of the crate, mirror exposed, and whispered, "Harper, if you're in there, give me a sign." The lights went out. When they returned, she was there, in the mirror, but not alone. Avarice loomed behind her grin. January 8, 2024. The decision. Daniel contacted Father Ramon, the last remaining member of the clergy, who had once overseen the Stanley during its brief stint as a monastery in the 1940s. Ramon, now 93, bedridden and fading, had heard the name Everest before. "It's not just a ghost," the old man rasped. "It's a devourer born from grief, grown through mirrors, through guilt." Daniel leaned closer. "It can't be killed," Ramon continued, "but it can be passed, shifted, redirected." "How?" "You must give it something stronger than itself to feed on, something endless." Daniel understood. He would need to go back in. January 10, 2024. The ritual. Daniel returned to the Stanley ruins alone. He carried the mirror. A fresh sigil was drawn into the snow above where room 217 had once stood. He lit a circle of candles, opened the crate, looked into her eyes one last time. I'm coming for you. And then he stepped through. Inside the mirror, the final confrontation. The inside was a labyrinth of broken realities, stitched together by reflections and screams. Daniel wandered for hours or days. Time folded differently here. He passed endless versions of the Stanley burning, frozen, crumbling. Some rooms looped forever. Others bled. Finally he found her. Harper stood in the ballroom, dancing alone. Dust floated like snowflakes in the air. Her dress shimmered with mirror dust, and her eyes were nearly all glass. He stepped forward. Harper. She turned. For a second, just a second, she was still her. Then Averos rose from her spine like a cloak. Daniel didn't hesitate. He held out the blade reformed in this realm, glowing with every memory they'd shared. Let her go. Averos smiled. Trade me. Daniel nodded. Harper screamed. He kissed her forehead, and then he cut his own chest open, exposing the mirror Ashford had left dormant inside him. The true seal. The origin. Averos shrieked. The mirror inside Harper shattered. The creature lunged for Daniel, and in that moment, Harper shoved Averos into Daniel's mirror, sealing it shut with her hands. Daniel's body ignited with light. The ballroom exploded. January 13, 2024. Boulder. The mirror was found in the ruins. Cracked now. Lifeless. Harper awoke in a hospital bed. Alive, whole. But Daniel was never found. She held the shard of glass he left behind. His reflection still smiles at her from time to time. Watching. Guarding. Forever. Thank you for joining this chilling journey through the paranormal legacy of the Stanley Hotel in Forever Wild. If this story gave you chills, leave a comment below. Would you ever spend a night alone in a haunted hotel like the Stanley? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more terrifying tales. There's always a new reflection waiting. Stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, not all mirrors show you what's real.